Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. You know, these guys have sort of, brilliantly shared about the how of design. I want to talk a little bit and go in a little bit different direction, and that is, if design is about creating great experiences, then I want to talk today about design research, which is really about sort of problem seeking, right? If design is problem solving, then design research is problem seeking. We need to know what problem it is we're solving in the first place, or what experience we're trying to create from a customer perspective. I've tried to avoid the font substitution problem by using PDF here, so we'll see if that works. I want to start off with just a quick story. My son, Liam, had to go in for surgery to get tubes put in his ears. Anybody have kids that had to have that happen? I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I decided I'm going to get a cup of coffee. And the coffee comes in this really interesting cup. And this is a very low-tech kind of thing, right? But it's the cup is a poker game, basically with 4 cards around the outside, and the draw card is underneath. And so, this was a couple of years ago. Remember when poker was really hot? It was like the hot marketing thing. And I started thinking about this, and here I have a steaming hot cup of coffee, and if I want to know if I won, I either have to pour scalding hot coffee on my face or on my lap. So I was thinking about all the people that drove off the road screaming in agony about, again, so this idea of a, interactive cup of steaming hot coffee just didn't seem like a very good one. So the point being that the design decisions that we make every day result in experiences. Like it or not, on purpose or not, good or effective or not, okay? So really understanding what it is that we're trying to design, having a target, understanding what our consumers desire is an important part of effective design. So ideas are everywhere, but relevant ideas are really what we're looking for, okay? Just a quick statistic, from 2000 to 2005, companies that focused on customer experience outperformed the S&P 500 by 10 to 1. So this is a pretty compelling argument that some investment in understanding experiences today and desired experiences for consumers will pay off in our technology and design decisions. We think about design really at the end of the day then. Design is about people. Yes, it's about technology. Yes, it's about physical products and two-dimensional experiences, but at the end of the day, it's really about people, experiences that they have today and experiences that they want to have. And so if we know the difference between those two things, then we can design great products. When we want to look at this, people then from all different kinds of perspectives, and Rich mentioned some of the ways, Rich and I both have looked at the kind of experience, how they're making design decisions to try to produce a great experience. Well, we need to look at experiences from a physical, a cognitive, emotional standpoint, all the different kind of factors about who these folks are, their identity, who they aspire to be, how they want to feel, and what kind of things they need from an experience. So by its simple definition, design is sort of the difference between customer stories of today, right? The experiences that we're having today, and the stories that we want to have. And I'm going to tie that back to how we can look at design. Design research then sort of engages people in the design process, throughout the design process. So if you're making design decisions today and you haven't engaged customers to sort of try to understand what it is that they need and what direction you're trying to push design decisions in, then you're basically guessing. And guessing is not a great way to be in business, and some guesses are great. I mean, there are some people who can guess really well, but the majority of companies that are guessing about desired customer experiences are sort of getting beat in this super competitive, consumer-empowered kind of world. All right, so there's lots of ways to get information from people. And these, I'm just showing a few ways here. I'm going to talk about some of these in more detail. But specifically, design research engages customers in the beginning of a design program when you need ideas, or at the end of a design program or mid-design program when you need direction or you need to evaluate ideas. So examples of design research. This is ethnographic research, where you go into the environment where people work, live, and play to sort of understand what experiences are like today. So this is a surgical suite. I'm going to sort of go off the consumer retail path a little bit to talk about experiences in general. So just going out and noticing what's going on can give you some great inspiration. This is a research technique called participatory design. It's a projective research technique. It comes out of psychology, where you give people tools to express what more ideal experiences look like. It's difficult for people if you say, well, hey, what do you want? You know, people have a hard time answering that question. So a lot of people say, well, people can't tell you what they want, so we don't do research. Don't waste money on research because people can't tell you what they want. Well, if you give them the right tools, people can express what a more ideal experience looks like. This is a program that we worked on for Samsung to help them operationally define words like rugged, their core brand values. So one of the things we're finding out there is companies define these core brand values, what they stand for, what their brand is all about, but they don't know how to do those in technology design. So participatory design can help us sort of operationally define these terms, like engagement, like what Dan was mentioning on the builder there. So participatory tools can help people also express ideals and emotions. So one of the things about ethnographic research, right, if we go watch people, well, we can't watch a desire, right? We can't see an emotion. Well, we can see one, but it's hard to interpret. So we need to combine different techniques to sort of give us the story of today and tomorrow. And then here's a simple example of usability testing. Simply putting a product in front of somebody to see if they can use it. You know, what's interesting about these voting machines, these voting systems, is that generally polling stations are manned by older folks. So you have, and often women. So you have older women who have to sort of, muscle up and set up these polling stations and then use the technology to sort of set up the voting technology. So this is a challenge. How do we design for this individual who may be a little bit adverse to technology and may be sort of afraid of it? So how do you create sort of a compelling experience there? Okay, so design research then sort of channels our creativity. Remember I said in the beginning that it's not that there's a lack of ideas out there. There's tons of ideas. The question is which ones are relevant, right? So the design research channels creativity into the most useful outcomes for the consumer. And what that does is it gives you sort of clarity internally about what it is that you're designing, who you're designing for. It gives you inspiration for better ideas. And it gives you alignment. Alignment not only with your products and services to the market, so that they're more in line and resonate with consumers, but alignment internally about what problem you're solving. Has anybody ever been in a meeting where you're all sitting around the room and everybody's having a different conversation and it's really clear that everybody has a different perspective on what problem you're solving? Well, those kind of things are reflected in the end product. So you get these sort of Frankenware products where it's kind of like, I don't really understand how these pieces go together. In large companies, what we see is that this sort of siloing of different organizations within the company result in sort of very inconsistent and disrupted kind of experiences. So this can give us alignment that allow us to sort of, again, create great customer experiences. I want to talk a little bit about a program we did for Check-Free and now Fiserv. And this had to do with the future of online banking. So that was the key question. What should the future of online banking be like? And the way we approached this was, first of all, to build an experiential language to help consumers talk to us about what banking meant for them. And more importantly than banking or online banking, financial life management. Because we know that banking is sort of a solution to a larger life problem, right? So we wanted to give them a broad language of expression using these participatory tools. We did in-home interviews, and the context helped us understand what sort of a day in the life of financial life management was for these consumers. Right? And we also had them build these canvases using the tools to express what a more ideal experience looked like. So we were able to get very concrete direction about what experiences should be like and what they shouldn't be like, and what main goals look like. And while this looks like a mess, when you get 40 of these or 70 of these, you begin to immediately see patterns in what people are looking for from a more ideal experience. Okay, so the kind of things we learned is that certainly with the economy, there's a lot of things that are driving consumers' emotive and functional needs of an online banking kind of solution. So they're faced with a lot of problems, right? They're struggling with this instant gratification that I think a lot of us are struggling with, wanting things right now. By the way, that instant gratification is what drives the consumer's mentality for a lot of the experiences that we're designing. They want it now, they want you to deliver, they want you to anticipate, and if you don't, then they'll go somewhere else because the competitors are right next door. So they're struggling with instant gratification, they're hyper-connected, they're living longer, there's sort of a time compression that's happening where their day is completely filled and there's no room for sort of relaxation or decompression. They have a fragmented financial life, and that is their information is spread all over and they're not really sure what the picture is because no one entity or organization or even themselves owns or can look at what that whole financial picture looks like. And there's a lack of trust because a lot of people got hurt, right, recently. So from the research, we found some of these main drivers, but we were also developed personas. So you heard Rich talk about personas. And the panel here will tell you that personas are more and more of a standardized practice now in design and development. They're sort of a sister to market segmentation, whereas segmentation sort of tells you about go-to-market strategy and price point and channel. Personas will give you an archetype of your customer, but more from an emotional and functional standpoint. What do they need? What does future experience look like, right? So we built 3 kinds of personas that helped us understand who these folks were and what they needed out of an online banking experience, right? And what that looked like. So there's some demographic kinds of things, but you can see really that it's about how they strategize to deal with their financial life. So we had some folks who were sort of achievers, we had people who were sort of reactive consumers who were just trying to not shoot themselves in the foot, and then we had more planner type people. So this helped us understand what they needed, what each type of consumer needed from a banking solution. And then we could translate these kind of things then into what a more ideal experience looked like. So an ideal experience built awareness of your financial situation. It was consolidated and actionable. It was educational. It was empowering, right? Relevant and smart. So these were all things that we learned using that participatory research, right? To get people to express what a more ideal experience was. And then we could drive those specifically into the way that might look, in this case, on a mobile device or in an application. So this is a prototype. It was eventually built in Silverlight. That sort of that embodied or represented what a more ideal experience was like. So this prototype allowed the client to tell a story of what a more desired experience looks like, both internally for their teams, but also to their partners. And they have now launched several initiatives that aren't this ambitious, but they're sort of working, I think, towards a more future banking experience. So let me just cover a few how-tos that maybe you can take back with you, hopefully. The first is tips on this design research. The first is to know where you are, know what question it is that you're asking. If you have ideas, then consider evaluative type of research approaches, usability testing, things like that. If you need ideas, if you're not really sure what direction to be going, then consider generative type of research. Know if you're asking a buy kind of question, is it about buying decisions or is it about out-of-box experience and usage? Are you trying to evolve the category? Like, are you trying to build or design the next great toothbrush, or are you trying to create something or transform the category? Are you trying to do Crest light strips, something completely different? Depending on how you answer these questions, there are different tools you can use to learn from your consumers, your customers, about what matters. The next is the flex your hyper-noticing muscles. Now, this is a program that we did for Carhartt in apparel. And there was a 4-season study that we did to look at how construction workers and ranch hands and farmers layer apparel in support of their job. Well, the thing that's interesting about this is just by going into the environment and observing, you can understand what matters about the strategies they use to stay warm and functional on a job. In this particular case, and I know this is a funny picture, but it was instructive. What we found was that there was a tribal mentality among work crews, where the more experienced guys, the inexperienced guys who are cold on the job and who are not very functional, like this guy, were learning from the pros right next to him. So they were learning how to stay warm, how to stay functional, how to dress for the job. And so you saw these kind of things, and this then was an opportunity for Carhartt to go in and market either specifically to the pros or to educate folks to get them up to speed, because you never want to look like the junior guy on the crew, right? So observational research can be instructive. The third tip is to design with your customers, not just for them. So participatory research gives you an opportunity to co-design, right, or collaborate with your customers about what an ideal solution is. This is another example of participatory research. It's called Velcro modeling. A program we did for Motorola to look at an in-cab informational system. And the question is, well, where in the cab should it go? How would it be laid out? Would it be a portrait or a landscape screen? Would it have a full keyboard, or did it need to, would it be okay to sort of use shorthand text typing? What kind of indicators did you need on it, right? Where should the buttons go? And one of the things that we found was that their early concepts were landscape, with a full keyboard and buttons on both sides, like an ATM almost, right? But with a full keyboard. But what we found was that this was located in a cab, and people were going to be using it with their right hand, primarily in the US, the opposite in Europe. But, so they wanted, and they were dealing a lot with list information. So just by talking to people, you found that they would put things naturally in a portrait format, because they were dealing with lists of information, what lists of turns, right? Because I'm a trucker, where do I turn? Lists of information about where my next stop was. List of information about what cargo I had to drop off, right? So list information fit perfectly into this format, and they could locate function keys on the right-hand side and allow them to still use while having one hand on the wheel. So just doing these kind of things can help out. Oh, did I press the wrong thing?
No problem.
Thank you. The fourth tip is to tell stories of the future. So once you use this research to understand current and desired experience, take the time to sit down and storyboard what future it is you're trying to create for your customers. Because what this does is it gives you alignment internally, it gives you direction, and it helps guide your decision making. So this is some work we did for Dell to sort of help them internally get aligned and align with their customers as to what their future experience should be like. And so just a simple storyboarding technique allowed us to do it with minimal investment. There's no technology investment here, but it allows us to really clearly tell the story of the future before we put a lot of money into code and hardware and the like. And the last tip that I would give you is to build experience metrics to assess how you're doing in this experiential landscape. All this research you get you can develop specific metrics to measure how you're doing. Well, in the adage, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Well, that's the case with user experience too. So this is an example of a kind of dashboard we use for user testing, usability testing, creating experiential metrics that can be tracked over time across the organization to see how we're doing, to see where user experience defects are, and the like. And that gives you the ability to trace and track and measure how you're doing in the experiential sense. Okay, so that's all I had for today. Thanks a lot. Any questions?
I noticed you used hand-drawn storyboards. Is there some reason for that in your mind?
We've done both. Sorry. We've done both hand-drawn storyboards, or you can do Flash or Flex. And what we find is sometimes the hand-drawn stuff can go faster, and you're not hung up in the technology to design it. In fact, talk to some of the design folks here. It's sometimes easier to work on a sketch than it is to try to get hung up in the technology to sort of create an idea. So
I think one of the things to think about too is something feels more polished for me. When I put that in front of a client, they feel like that's an end result.
Right.
Whereas if I can work quick and fast and iterative through something in sketch format, it's more, first and foremost, it's quicker for me. And when I put that in front of the client, it's not the expected solution. So, I can go through and mock something up in Photoshop, put that in front of the client as a sketch, and then I go back to say, okay, now it's time to design it. And they'll go, well, didn't you already design it? No, I didn't really design it yet.
And it's the same thing with your customers. If you put a very polished Flash or type prototype in front of them, they react differently to it because they think it's done. So they'll. But if you give them something that's more sketch-based, they know they have the pen. They know they can write right on it. They can say, well, you know what, this thing, get rid of that. I don't need that. What I need is this. So you signal to them what kind of conversation you want to have by the fidelity of the prototype. So again, what kind of fidelity you put into that sort of storyboard or prototype is dependent on what kind of conversation you need to have and where you are in the process.
Very good.
Yeah. Any questions?
Chris, you met a few years ago, and I really appreciate everything you bring to the table here. You're obviously the best expert that I've ever heard on this subject. I'm running into the same problem and thinking that here I go with another startup. We are not limited, Bath and Body Works, whatever. Everything that you guys are talking about is something that we know that we need to design on our new product, and we can't afford it. So I guess what I'm kind of looking for is some kind of input in terms of, when we're out trying to get a deal funded to say, give me, 70,000 or 100,000 so I can work on all this customer experience stuff before we design our product. It's something that we need to do, and it's something that we couldn't possibly get funded to have it into a startup product. So, what's the advice for, those of us that, messing with design for the web for 15 years, so it's not like we don't have experience, but it's always our experience. It's not necessarily the ability to go out and get consumers.
It's interesting. I actually approached some VC and angel investors about the idea of experiential due diligence. Like, you do the business due diligence before you invest. Well, why wouldn't you do experiential due diligence? And they're like, nah, I don't need that. I invest in a management team, not an idea. So that's what they told me. But I do think that you can use, like, some of the stats about the 10-to-1, folks that are, people who are focused on experience. And the other thing is, if you can bring firsthand that voice of the customer to those conversations, then it immediately becomes compelling. It's like, don't believe me. In fact, some of our reports, people they're like, well, those are your idea. Those are your interpretations of what the customer said. And we say, no, well, here's all the voice. So we use quotes, we use video, we tell a story in the consumer's own words, and that's extremely compelling for an investor, or for a design team.
Yeah, because we either build it and get traction, then we'll invest in your deal.
Right. And the whole idea, if I build it, they will come, kind of thing, like the Kevin Costner movie or whatever that is, Field of Dreams. It just doesn't work, right? So bring that voice to the customer that you can, because then it becomes immediately.